Welcome back to Vision Chat. Today, Stina and I are interviewing Dr. Michelle Cole. Michelle is a licensed psychologist and somatic experiencing practitioner in private practice in San Diego, California. She is also a teacher of meditation and yoga, a certified breathwork facilitator, and Equus coach. Michelle believes we all have a unique prescription for healing that can be discovered when we slow down and learn to listen to our inner wisdom. She sees her job as helping to remove anything that stands in the way of clients being able to access their inner healers and come home to themselves. That is beautiful. Thank you so much for being here with us, Michelle. Can you tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I am, like you said, a psychologist, and I'm interested in all things holistic healing. And I have this, maybe it's not a problem, but I have to learn everything that I'm interested in, and I have to really learn it. So I become a teacher of most modalities that I'm interested in, just that never-ending interest in different things that I hear, and I just get so curious and want to know more. So I was just raised in the Midwest near Chicago, Illinois, just kind of a basic, normal upbringing, and went out to the West Coast for college, for graduate school, and really kind of found my people out there. Everybody's really open-minded and interested in different modalities. So I just started getting into all things healing. I love animals. I've got 2 mini donkeys and 2 rescue dogs, and I'm very passionate about rescuing animals. I just love spending time with animals.
I'm just really curious. I'm biased because I'm a therapist. Do you incorporate working with animals in the therapy that you do?
I do. So you mentioned I was a certified Equus coach. And what that means essentially is life coaching with horses. And I bring clients out with the horses. Sometimes it's kind of threatening to talk to a therapist. It feels uncomfortable, or maybe you're not ready. But there's something about bringing a horse into the picture, or even a donkey, that people just feel more comfortable and they start opening up. And of course, equines are mirrors for us. So they kind of reflect back to us what's going on the inside. And sometimes it's easier to talk about what's going on with the horse than talk about ourselves, but we are talking about ourselves in the process. Yeah, there's just something about animals that soften most people's hearts and just open them to working with the process.
For sure. I sometimes I don't have donkeys or, anything like that, but I have cats. And so sometimes, I've learned not to be bothered when they kind of jump on and they kind of want to poke their little faces in, because it's so interesting that the reactions from people. And maybe if it's something that's particularly difficult or challenging, they'll kind of be like, oh, the kitty. And, there's a whole other side.
Yes, I used to work with a group of combat veterans, and I brought my little elderly blind deaf poodle in. And all of a sudden, these big tough guys are like, oh, the baby, does she need to go outside? You just see this really soft, gentle side coming forward. And she was a great tool that I use.
Is there anything that you're calling yourself when it comes to the spiritual?
I think I call myself an empath. I don't know. I think healer doesn't feel right for me. I think that you are the healer. My clients are the healers of themselves. So empath feels good. I'm definitely a witch, but I don't advertise that because people have different connotations when it comes to that. So I know I'm a witch. People around me know I'm a witch. But that's something I hold out there. But I guess everybody knows now who's listening to the podcast. So.
I think you just outed yourself, Michelle. But that's awesome. I love that you call yourself a witch. That's fantastic. I'm just really curious also, what makes you particularly drawn to that label?
I just love magic. I've had a lot of magic in my life. I've had a lot of magical experiences. And I don't know, I think witch feels kind of like counterculture, and it feels kind of like in your face, like if you can't handle that, step back. And I think it attracts the right people that are like, oh, you're a witch. And it keeps the wrong people away of like, oh, you're a witch. I don't understand what that is. But like I said, I don't always lead with that.
Yeah, I find it's an interesting reaction that people have to that label, witch. And it's, I think it's like, to me, so if I see a confused look on someone's face, I'll kind of clarify, listen, there's all kinds of negative connotations that go along with that. But for me, a witch is a powerful, magical woman. And that's totally me. So I'm cool.
Yeah. I saw a meme somewhere. I love memes, but it said witches, guardians of the earth, protectors of the animals, following the seasons, healing with nature. I'm like, well, that is all me, so let go of all the Halloweeny type of things that come to mind, but just somebody that follows the rhythms of nature and has respect for all living beings. I think if you are that, then you might be a witch.
That's right. I love that definition. I'm really curious also, how did you get into spirituality? I know you mentioned a little bit about that in your intro, but like, how did you get into energy work, or do you have a story that goes along with your interest?
Well, I always had gifts when I was younger, but they were invalidated and shut down, which really made me question, am I crazy? Like, what's going on here? So I learned to not pay attention to those things. And it wasn't until I was probably in my 30s, I was living in Los Angeles and just kind of a hot mess, maybe, but I was working, but I just felt like kind of behind the eight ball all the time with work. I was very anxious if I didn't always have on TV or going out and doing something social, but I just felt ragged out, burned out. And here's another weird thing about me. I'm a pilot, and I used to teach people how to fly airplanes in addition to my private practice. And I had this one student, and he was so different than any other student. He wasn't like the best stick ever. He wasn't the easiest person to teach, but he really took things in stride. He was so easygoing, and his energy just felt different than anyone I had been close to. And I said, "What's wrong with you? Why are you like that?" And he said, "Well, I meditate." And I said, "Well, I can't meditate. I have too many thoughts. Like, my mind is way too busy. It's just not for me." And he's like, yeah. Everybody says that you need to be taught how to meditate. Go to this class. And I ended up going to a 6-week class at Insight LA. And it was an intro to mindfulness meditation. And I started having these really deep experiences where I could connect back with that part of me that was shut down. And as I started meditating, everything in my life started changing. I just felt that deep inner peace that I was after. And then, after that, just a series of events. I got rid of my TV. I was spending lots of time in quiet. And then LA didn't support my energy anymore. It was just felt like a constant attack of energy. And I ended up moving to a 65-acre ranch in the middle of nowhere in Northern California. Everybody's saying, "You're crazy. Like, what are you doing?" But I just felt like I have to go to the land. I have to go and be in solitude. And then things accelerated pretty quickly when I was out there by myself.
Did you find that just being in more of that quiet in nature just helped you feel better about being in your own space, and that it was more matching your energy?
It absolutely was. Yeah, just being in nature, it was just so quiet and so peaceful. And I think nature is so healing in itself. And of course, I was meditating, and I got more into that and was trying different modalities. I became a teacher of primordial sound meditation from the Chopra Center, and got into yoga and Ayurveda, and just started studying all different types of modalities. And it's very spiritual up there. It's near Nevada City. It was a little town near Nevada City, and people are all into crystals and, metaphysical things. And so I was like, oh, cool. I found my people, not just in the flashy kind of way that I saw it in LA, but in the people really, doing the work.
Do you feel like you got intuition, or did you know about this place before?
Well, this was one of the things that happened. So I could see in my mind's eye what this place I wanted to move to looked like. And I went to Montana and Idaho and Oregon. I was kind of scouting a location. And then there was somebody I knew who had bought a ranch in Northern California, and he's sending me pictures of the ranch. And I'm like, wow, that looks a lot like what I'm picturing. And I came up to visit him and his wife. And as we were driving through the town, up his driveway, just the full body chills. And I started shaking, and I was like, this is exactly what I've been picturing. And he said, it's odd, because as I was sitting here in my home and you're telling me about your vision, I'm looking around going, she's describing where I'm sitting. He said, and, we're putting up the ranch for sale. And I said, yes, and you're selling it to me. And so just I knew right then, I'm like, I'm moving here. I don't care what it takes to get here, but I'm moving here. And then kind of went from there. And then there were so many synchronicities when I moved there. Just the perfect job opportunity opened, the perfect office space opened, the perfect clientele started coming in. It was just one of those things where things flowed. And I really got a taste of what it's like when you're on the right path, that the universe just kind of opens doors for you.
I love that. And it's like your own manifestation too.
Looking back, I wish I would have been a little more specific of universe. Show me slowly and gently and little bits at a time and with ease, but I did not specify that. So I got a lot of lessons out there that were like, oh, very hard lessons, but I wouldn't trade them.
Do you love just the West Coast? Do you think you'll be out in this space in the future, or is that kind of open and you feel like you can explore other areas to live in?
I do feel the West Coast a lot. I really love Santa Fe. That's where I'm at right now. And that's kind of one of my special spots, although my partner is a surfer. So we're going to need to stay near the ocean. That's kind of a non-negotiable for him. So somewhere on the West Coast, not exactly sure we'll be in San Diego forever, but yeah.
Have you any childhood stories or any stories about spiritual stuff happening and you're like, oh, what is this? Or that surprised you?
Yeah, when I was young, I was forced to shut that down so much. So I always would know when somebody was feeling an emotion. I would say, Grandma, why are you so mad? I'm not mad. And, people would be like, what are you talking about? She's not mad. But I could feel the anger. I could feel it in my body. Or when somebody was sad, I could feel that in my body. But people would deny, no, I'm not sad. You're being silly. What are you talking about? So I just started thinking, all right, I'm not going to say that because I'm not getting great feedback. So I really shut that part down. But as I got older, I started paying more attention to things like that, such as my ranch. That was like a real confirmation of, okay, still got it. And then even at the ranch, so many things happened that were unexplainable. For example, I had somebody come pick up some wood. There was so much wood that I had on my property, and I saw posting, I need firewood for the winter. And I had this man come pick it up, and it was wet out. He was backing up his truck, and I heard a voice in my head say, he's going to hit you. And, why would it? That's silly. And he's backing up the truck, and all of a sudden it accelerates and he goes into my fence. And the next thing I know, I'm just standing next to the truck. I felt something pick me up, like by the back of the neck, and pull me out of the way, like lift me up and pull me out of the way. And he got out and he was shaking and he was like, oh my God, my foot slipped off the brake pedal. I can't believe you're alive. And I was like, yeah, me neither. I can't believe that happened. But I very much clear as day heard the voice, he's going to hit you, right before whatever that was that happened. And there's been a lot of things like that where I just get that knowing. And I've been conditioned to ignore that voice. But there's been enough things that have happened now where I'm just like, I just pay attention to it. And if I'm wrong, it doesn't matter. Like I just have learned to listen to that voice on the inside.
I got chills just from listening to that. As you were saying, I'm like, oh, but it's amazing how, we get these, like, I call them like hits. I just hope, like, I cross my fingers. I'm like, I hope I listen. It's just that, like you have that split second of like, do I listen or not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had plenty of times where it's come back to burn me of, oh, you're being too sensitive, or come on, oh, you're being a princess, don't think that. And I put myself in harm's way many times because I just didn't want to be extra. But I was picking up on something, that person wasn't safe, that situation wasn't safe. And luckily there's been nothing too, life-threatening. But there were always times where I know I get a sense about somebody, and I'm always willing to be proved wrong over time, but I pay attention to that intuitive hit when I get it.
Do you know what pulled you out of the way? Have you had time to kind of meditate back on that? And
Well, since then, I've learned about some angels and guides that I have. I have three that are like my main ones, and I think I don't know who it was, but somebody pulled me out of the way. I mean, there just wouldn't have been enough time for me to react or move and step over the wood and get out of the way. I can't explain it any other way other than something moved me, or, I guess if you were not believing in that type of stuff, maybe I just had a burst of adrenaline and jumped out of the way, but it definitely felt like something had me by like the scruff of the neck and just pulled me.
That's amazing. That sounds like a very intense experience. Have you ever freaked anybody out with your abilities or scared anyone?
I don't know that I've scared anyone, but kind of amazed people. Like, how do you know that? Yeah. So a lot of times in session with a client, I don't advertise that I'm intuitive, but I'll kind of drop it a little more tentatively of like, I'm getting an image of blah, 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 or I'm hearing these words come to mind. Does this mean anything for you? And, 9.5 out of 10 times it has some deep meaning for my client. And I think rarely are they like, how did you know that? They just kind of go with it. But I frame it very tentatively of like, I don't know, I'm getting an image of, a house, or I'm getting an image of this, or I want to tell you these words, but I'm not sure why. And something that comes to mind is I was talking to a friend actually, and I said, I feel like I want to tell you, like, don't oversalt the soup. I don't know what that means, but I really keep hearing these words, don't oversalt the soup. And she's like, oh my God, my grandma used to always say that to me. And it was like, in terms of a relationship, like, don't move too fast, like, take it slow. You can't like unadd the salt once you've added it. But I had no idea what that meant when I gave it to her, but I just kept hearing it. And it was like somebody was like pushing me, like, say it, say it, say it. Yeah. And then I've had dreams about people's loved ones that have passed. And I'm like, I had a weird dream about this person. I don't know if this means anything for you. And it, more often than not, it does. I mean, it almost always, okay, I'm going to say it always does, because I can't really think of a time where somebody said that didn't resonate for me, or if they did, they came back later and said, you know what, I didn't want to talk about this thing, but here's what was really going on.
It must be so validating for the people that you're talking to and being open with it too, to get, or like, I know a lot of people might be scared to maybe say, oh, this is what is coming through. But the fact that you're using it and sharing it is very inspiring.
Yeah, I think so. It's like, I have a tool. Why would I hold any medicine back from them? And they can choose whether they want to take that in or not. But if I feel it coming through, it's almost like my own body takes a hit if I don't release it. So I just frame it very tentatively, and they can choose whether they want to take that in or not. And, sometimes I'm wrong. I'm sure I'm wrong sometimes, but yeah, I've just kind of learned not to hold that back, because typically when I have a hit like that, further on in the story, a couple days, weeks, months, that same thing will come back around. I'm like, oh, I should have said that in that time. Because it does kind of help the process go more quickly.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Do you feel like there's any misconceptions when it comes to all of this?
I think a lot of people don't believe in it. I think it can be really scary, especially if you haven't grown up in a way that supports that. And it's confusing for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people don't realize they all have these gifts. So it seems like just a certain few, can tap into their intuition or know things or have different clairvoyant abilities. But everybody really has these gifts. It's just a matter of developing them and trusting yourself. And that was one of the main things when I went through training, was trusting myself and also my classmates. And Sina, you know that too, that it's like, I don't really know what I'm getting, but let me just give you the image coming up. And it was astounding, even for us students practicing, it was like, yes, that's exactly the thing. But you start to doubt yourself, because you're like, a red vase with like a little monkey face on it. Why am I like, what does that have to do with the story? And then you find out like, this was like their childhood thing, or it has a lot of meaning. And then the client has all the associations to it.
It's interesting because I think that when you are learning these skills, like you said, we all have the gifts. It's just that some of us shut it down for whatever reason, either negative experiences, invalidation, all kinds of reasons. But we all have the abilities. And when we're learning, I think it's that, like, do I trust myself to say it? And I think we put pressure on ourselves too to get it right. And we don't want to be wrong because it causes some kind of fear or shame, or like, oh no, I got this wrong, or I said the wrong thing, or that doesn't even make sense. But I think, part of it also is like remembering I don't really have to understand what this is because it's not for me. It's for the person that I'm providing this information for. It has to make sense for them, not me. So I'm just going to deliver it. Right. And I think that's the tricky part, right? Like I'll trust myself to just deliver what I'm getting, and it's up to them to make sense of it. And like you said earlier, either you take it and you're like, yep, I own it, that resonates, or no, not for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as long as we're staying connected to spirit will guide us. When we move into ego and we start like, we want to, be this expert, spirit will smack us and be like, no, let me show you the ways in which you are being a phony. So it's really important to stay humble and stay connected to spirit and your own spiritual practice. That's like a prerequisite. That's a continuing education for doing this type of work, is you have to be doing your own work.
That's wonderful advice. Do you have more advice for people that are like maybe starting on their spiritual journey and they're, just getting into studying or learning about these things? Or is there anything that you would have done on your own journey like differently?
On my own journey, of course, I wish it were faster. I wish I would have, listened to this earlier, but I trust in divine timing that I got the lessons when I needed to. But I think for somebody starting out, starting with a meditation practice would be the first step. Learning how to meditate, learning how to sit quietly with yourself, and you start to tap into that inner wisdom. I think that's really important. And then finding somebody to guide you. There's a lot of phonies out there. So really trusting your intuition on who you want to guide you into that, and then ultimately trusting yourself over any teacher. People have a lot of techniques, and anytime somebody starts insisting that their technique is the best, or you have to study with them and you're not allowed to study with anyone else, then I start getting those vibes of like, oh, I feel like I'm being controlled. So I think your relationship with any teacher should feel free and expansive and supported. And there's so many teachers out there that, you can kind of sample anyone and just see who lights you up.
Is there anything you would like to done differently on your journey?
Gosh, I wish I just would have trusted myself earlier. I went through a lot of mental gymnastics, a lot of pain, looking to everyone else like, oh, they've got the answers. They've, looking to a lot of gurus or teachers, or giving away my power to other people. And I wish I wouldn't have done that as much, because I think it created unnecessary suffering. I wish all of that time would have been spent more in my own meditation, quietness, nature, listening to myself. But I think it was all part of my process. I really needed to see the ways in which those people were inauthentic, or didn't have the answers, or only went so far and I went further than they did. I think for some teachers, it becomes threatening once the student their gifts start to get stronger. And a good teacher will be like, yes, you go, like you've got this. And they kind of boost you up. It's just a matter of, I just wish I would have listened to myself more.
Are there any ways in which like you use like your spiritual gifts, like that would be like maybe like on a day-to-day basis, or like, something that people normally wouldn't think like you could use your gifts for?
I think with most decisions I make during the day, I need to sit quietly with it. And sometimes I'll ask the question before I meditate of like, do I want to go to this training, or do I want to go to this trip, or do I want to take on this new client? Sometimes it's like we get so wrapped up in the energy and you want to say yes, and you don't want to let people down. But then when you really sit with yourself and my body tells me right away if it's a yes or a no. But if I'm moving too quickly and I'm trying to fit too much into the day, then it's harder for me to listen. If I'm not spending time in nature, it's harder for me to listen. If I'm, drinking alcohol, which I do very rarely, it's harder for me to listen. So as long as I'm keeping the channel clean, I think most decisions I'm making during the day, I'm asking spirit for guidance.
Do you find that, because I noticed also in your intro, you mentioned helping people slow down. Do you just feel like we're moving too fast in life and there's just so much going on that we don't make room or space to just really be in touch with ourselves?
Yeah, we don't make room to be in touch with ourselves and also to heal. Anything that's trauma that is stored in our body needs slowness for our body to catch up to what our mind already knows about the trauma. And oftentimes it's bracing patterns, it's, psychosomatic illness that people, when they've been to many doctors and they go, there's no cause, we can't see a cause, it's in your head. And there's varying degrees of being shamed by medical professionals, but the body is always talking. And once we can learn how to invite the body in as an ally and put it with equal importance as the mind, not better, not worse, and just give it that space to catch up. It's like, all right, let's make the space and listen to what you're saying. I think that's so important when we slow down. And for a lot of people, the reason we move so quickly is because it's really uncomfortable when we slow down. If I can just keep moving, like when I was living back in LA, if I can just keep the TV on, I can have enough social things to do and I can stay busy with work and, just always on the move, then my mind didn't really need to process, or my body didn't need to process some things that were traumatic that had happened that created a lot of anxiety when I just sat quietly with myself. And for some of us, it's not realistic to just think you're going to sit and start meditating and that's going to be your practice. So sometimes when our nervous system is very overstimulated, hypervigilant, the sympathetic nervous system is on all the time, we need to find ways to move our bodies that feel like a meditation. Hiking is a great moving meditation. And so we need to learn how to step down into the silence. But I think the reason meditation doesn't work for a lot of people is because they're going from 100 miles an hour to a full stop. And it's like, this is uncomfortable. I don't want to do it. And I believe meditation should always be comfortable. There's a lot of rules about it. Sit perfectly straight. Don't move you. And I'm like, if you want to lay down, lay down. Like whatever's going to get you to want to do this, you need to move your body, move your body. And I forgot your original question already. I feel like I'm just talking.
No, you answered it. You answered it. And you also just brought up some really good points about there's no wrong or right way to start doing these things and these practices. It's, I think, your intention that counts and just listening to yourself and trying to do what's comfortable for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you feel like is your next step on your journey?
There's so many more things I want to learn. I mean, there's trainings I want to do. The vision I'm holding now is a healing ranch that people can come to and spend some time, like stay overnight, be with the animals, be with nature, enjoy all these healing practices that I know how to do, and invite other people that are also doing this work to come do their work at the ranch. So I definitely have a vision. I have flashes of it. I don't have the clear vision yet, but the more I do breath work, it really comes when I do breath work. I get more and more pieces of the puzzle. And so I'm learning how to ask more specific questions like, what state is this place in? Can you show me the address? Things like that. So I'm really holding the vision for a healing type of property that people can come enjoy.
Can you talk a little bit about the breath work that you do? I'm just, noticing that, breath is connected to so many healing modalities, and I'm wondering how it fits for your practice.
I love the breath. I think it's the fastest way to shift your mood, to shift your physiology. But the breath work in particular that I do is by David Elliot, and there's no name to it really, but David Elliot, he wrote the book, The Reluctant Healer and Healing, two of my favorite books. And it's a 3-part breath. It's a breath in through the belly, the chest, and then exhale. And it's all with your mouth open. And what starts happening is you start moving through the layers first of the body. It becomes very uncomfortable for the first 7-10 minutes. It's like, oh, I don't know if I can keep doing this. And then as you get through that layer, you start noticing, well, you can see what you start noticing, but all sorts of insights, memories come up. It's a really quick way to blast through trauma, just kind of like EMDR blasts through trauma. EMDR is like solvent. Breath work is like solvent. It moves a lot of energy if you're stuck. It reveals a lot of insights. And yeah, so that's the breath work that I practice. It's with music, and spirit kind of helps me choose what songs whoever needs to hear or the group needs to hear. And you get a lot of release that way and a lot of expansion that way.
How did you get into breathwork?
I was at I guess it was a spa. It's called We Care Spa in Desert Hot Springs, and it's fasting and colonics, and they offer a bunch of classes you can go to. And there was somebody that was a breathwork practitioner, and he led us through. And I felt like I was on psychedelics during that time, because it does induce a non-ordinary state of consciousness when you do that. It felt great, and it was like nothing I'd ever experienced. And it's legal and it's free. And when I got home, I looked up this person's teacher, David Elliot, and then I joined his next healer training. He calls it healer training, and he's got 5 levels of that. And I started studying that back in 2009, and then I just recently got certified in that 2 years ago.
Well, you just mentioned something that Stina and I have been kind of contemplating doing a podcast on psychedelics. I'll confess, I don't know anything about it, but you just mentioned it. Do you use psychedelics or in your work, or do you have any thoughts, opinions about that?
I am in a training program through the California Institute of Integral Studies to use psychedelic therapy and research. So I'm just at the very beginning. We've had our first weekend. It's not something that I use yet, but I will start doing ketamine-assisted psychotherapy in the new year. It's something that I'll start offering for clients. And I think it can be really powerful. It's not a, magic pill, magic bullet. It really needs to be used thoughtfully for the right reasons with the right people, timing, tact, and dose, as we say. It's not just like take this and heal. I think we live in such a quick fix culture that just wants to, take this pill and be healed of their trauma. It doesn't work like that. But I think if chosen carefully and used cautiously, I think it can really be profound.
That's awesome. So we'll be on the lookout for that.
Yeah. And psychedelics are still mostly illegal all over this country. But I think coming up pretty soon, psilocybin and MDMA will be able to be used therapeutically. It won't be available for everyone, but under the supervision of a doctor.
You mentioned David Elliot and his books. Do you have favorite books that are your go-tos that you'd like to recommend, or YouTube channels, or anything people can look up?
Yeah, those are 2 of my favorite books. And then The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer is a book that I come back to every couple of years. And every time I read it, it's a different book. Because when I first started, I'm like, I'm not really sure what he's talking about here. But as I get further on my journey, I'm like, oh, this is some profound stuff. So that's a book I really love. Yeah, I would say those are some of my favorites. And then my first book, like my gateway drug to all of spirituality, was one of Dan Millman's books. And I think he is the gateway drug for a lot of people. What was the name of his first book? I think it's called Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And it's funny because the subtitle is A Book That Changes Lives. And, he just kind of talks about his experience and gives kind of writing prompts and just things for reflection. And it's a very gentle way to ease yourself in if you're interested in spirituality or any of these practices. And he's written several books, but I really like him.
True. It literally does change people's lives.
Yes. And I remember I've given that book to clients. I haven't done it in a long time, but I can remember giving it to some clients years ago that I gave it to them to borrow, and they got so much out of it. I'm like, just keep it. So I've had to rebuy that book several times.
Do you want to describe a little bit more about what you do or where people can find you?
Sure. Yeah. I've got a private practice. I work on Zoom half time or more than half time. And I have an office in Solana Beach, California, where I mainly do somatic experiencing and neuroaffective touch. So it is trauma touch work. It's with your clothes on, very light touch. And it's just helping the body release trauma and process anything that's stuck in there. And that might sound a little bit woo-woo, but if you think of it just more like tension patterns, bracing patterns in the body, it works really great for chronic pain and anything that's just kind of stored up that our body is holding on for us because we haven't processed it yet.
Thank you so much. Is any other thoughts? Anything else that you want to kind of put out there?
No, this went by so quickly.
Thank you so much. We can't thank you enough. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you.